Hey everyone, Sean Allison here again with another re-edit from an old video. This one's from 2016. This is Cozumel. This is going to be Columbia Reef. It's one of the shallower reefs. It's roughly 30 to 40 foot deep. Uh, where we're going to jump off the boat and just do a long drift here. This is going to be a pretty long video. It's going to be me and Heather Allison here. That's my daughter. It's pretty much going to be me and her this whole video. Now, the way this usually goes in Cozumel is we just jumped off the boat. Everybody preps. The boat's moving. It's not anchored. When they get in position up current of the reef they want to drift over, you jump off the boat. Everybody kind of makes a descent, gets neutral just above bottom, and then you kind of move on. I'm pointing at a school of fish down there, those yellowish fish. You're going to see a few schools of those throughout the video here. I'll get in a little bit closer, but those are going to be a bunch of yellow grunts and blue striped grunts. Anytime you see a school of fish and they're yellowish, they're probably yellow grunts or blue stripe. The blue stripe will have a black tail. The yellow grunts will just be all yellow fins. It's kind of a mix in this school that we're looking at here. So anyway, in Cozumel, it is a park. The government kind of controls it. To go out on the boat and dive here, you have to buy a permit to dive the park. But they bring you out here, you jump off up current of the reef that you're going to dive, and again, the boat is just going to kind of drift up above. They're just going to kind of kill the engines and just kind of drift up above while we drift down below with the current. When we get to the end of this thing, the local dive guide, who's the guy with the orange arms here, this guy on the left, he's going to have a surface marker buoy he's going to send up to the top, inflated with air that will signal the boat, hey, we're about to start sending divers up. The boat will kind of drive up to the marker buoy and everybody can reboard the boat. So the boat kind of drifts along with us. I'm pointing at something here. I can't tell in the video what I'm pointing at. I don't remember. This is too long ago. It's probably a small crab or something inside that hole there. I'm not sure what it is though. I am going to have the video right here. It's going double speed, kind of skip. Just now, that was the hand sign for boat. I'm just signaling to my daughter that sound that we can hear is a boat. You can't hear it because the video's kind of skipping ahead here. But the kind of slower parts where I'm not close up doing kind of macro right up on stuff, I'll kind of skip ahead to save time on the video. Again, it's like 50 minutes. It was well over an hour, but I'm going to try to get this whole video in here. We'll just kind of fast forward to some of the little bit slower parts. It does kind of change throughout the dive here. It's pretty open. You see the boat right above head there. The bottom's relatively flat, but you have some really large coral heads, some kind of smaller ones like this. Then you go from barren bottom. You'll see throughout this dive how the coral and the amount of coral kind of changes. A lot of different variety of coral as well. I'm not a coral expert. I can't begin to tell you all the different kinds of coral that are down there. But if you can name a coral, it's probably down there. So anyway, again, the depths here are probably in the range of 30 to 40 feet. There's a queen conch there. You're going to see a bunch of those this video. Again, depths are 30 to 40 feet. When we go underwater, water tends to filter light out. And it filters it out in the color of the spectrum. Basically just taking the rainbow and filtering the colors out, starting with red, then orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. So when you get down kind of really deep, everything's just kind of shades of blue or violet, and you lose all those prettier colors. Right here, we're about 35, 40 feet deep, so we're starting to lose the colors. We're starting to lose kind of red and orange. Yellow will probably still show up a little bit, but we're right on that threshold where we're starting to lose color here. But that's a normal thing in diving. At about 30 feet, you're going to start losing colors. Temperature-wise, we're wearing wetsuits here. I do that to kind of protect me from fire coral and jellyfish and other things that add some buoyancy. One of the things a wetsuit does is provide warmth. Don't really need it here. Temperatures are in the mid-80s. So, again, I'm kind of wearing it for other reasons, but the wetsuits help identify other divers. I think my daughter's wearing a shorty here. You don't quite need the arms and the legs. Now you do lose body heat 25 times faster underwater than you do in air. So even at 85 degrees, eventually you would still get hypothermic. It would lower your core temperature. It just takes a really, really, really long time to get there. So minimal protection is kind of required down here in Cozumel. So anyway, just a quick note is down here in Cozumel, when you go down here on these dive boats, and most people are used to wearing gloves and having a dive knife and things like that on them. Before you get on the boat here, they're going to tell you no knives, no gloves. You're not even allowed to take it on the boat. They're not allowed within the park, the federal park. The reason for that is if you have gloves, you want to touch things. If you have a knife, you want to use it to stick and poke and pry things and try to take souvenirs home. They don't want you to do that. Therefore, they do not allow gloves or knife to even bring it out on the boat. So leave that stuff at home. You're not going to need it. You're not going to be able to use it in Cozumel anyway. As far as the life down here, it's mostly coral, a few small fish like damsels, some butterflies, chromis, grunts, things like that. But not a lot of really big schools of big fish down there. But if you want to see some coral, it really is the place to be. Quick note about sound underwater. Sound travels 4.5 times faster underwater than it does through air. The reason that's relevant is a couple of spot fin butterflies there, the yellow and white ones. We have those here locally out of Corpus Christi, but of course they're down there at Cozumel as well. I think there was a damsel in there as well. So anyway, sound travels so fast underwater. Normally what happens in air, when we hear somebody yells your name from 50 feet away, the sound is traveling at a slow enough speed that it actually hits one ear before it hits the other ear. Now, you can't discern that outwardly, but subconsciously your brain knows it hit the right ear, then it hit the left ear, then your brain points in a direction because the sound came from that way. That's how we discern direction. And it's moving at about 765 miles per hour through air. That's about 340 meters per second. Underwater, that sound's moving way faster. It's moving at 3,350 miles per hour. That's a lot more than 700. And that's about 1,500 meters per second. The problem with that is moving so fast, it hits both of your ears so quickly, regardless of the direction, that your brain can't determine which ear it hit first. It feels like it's hitting both ears at the same time. So discerning direction underwater when you hear sounds is very, very difficult. That's just something that divers kind of learn through scuba class, and something we get used to underwater. So that's just kind of a broken shell I saw sitting there. It looked out of place. I didn't know if an octopus was eating on that, or that could have been some other diver picked that up, was going to keep it for a souvenir and then drop it there. But I was kind of curious why it was sitting on top of that coral head. So I kind of picked it up and just kind of re-dropped it there. Another note, too, about scuba diving is with underwater, there's a bit of magnification that happens. Everything seems 33% larger. It's like looking through a magnifying glass. When you look at something, you see a fish, it looks about a third bigger than it actually is. It's actually smaller than what it looks like. It's also about 25% closer than what it looks like. It looks 25% closer. It's actually a little bit further away than what it looks like. So underwater, you see fish, and they look really big, and they look really close, but they're a little further away and a little smaller than you think they are. There's a school of yellow grunts there again. Now, with the water magnification issue, that's not really a big deal down here. Your stories sound a little better when you get topside. You talk about how big of a fish you saw. But that's really relevant when you start doing things like spearfishing, which isn't allowed down in Cozumel, but other places, that can be a real issue if you're shooting fish that need to be a certain size, and it gets kind of tricky being able to tell what size they are sometimes. But anyway, that's just another byproduct of scuba diving that scuba divers deal with on a pretty regular basis when we dive. So anyway, we're still on this drift here. This is 30 to 40 foot deep. This is going to be a pretty long video. This is all one long continuous dive. And because we're at such shallow depths, there's less pressure. Our air is going to last a pretty long time. Like, this dive was like just over an hour. So we did this all on one tank, and it lasts just over an hour at about 30 to 40 feet, which is doing pretty good. We're breathing at a pretty slow rate. But again, that's because we're shallow. When we go diving as a scuba diver, when we get underwater, I wanted to dispel a couple of myths that are real common here. Real quick note. See these pebbles on the bottom? kind of picking these things up here. I don't know what these are. They're real light. See them kind of floating when we let them go. They don't just sink straight back to the bottom. There's a lot of this. You can see this more on this dive. It's just certain areas are just covered with these little spherules. I don't know what they are. My best guess is going to be that it's fish excrement. It's fish poop, like little balls of poop that certain fish are putting out in certain areas. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know. I don't really know what those things were. But it's kind of interesting to see certain areas just covered, the seabed's just kind of covered with those things. And they're not very heavy. So anyway, back to pressure. When we go underwater, some of the myths that a lot of people tend to perpetuate is, we always hear as a scuba diver, people are talking about our oxygen tanks. Okay, first thing I want to clear up is they're not oxygen tanks. They're just air tanks. It's just compressed air. It's not pure oxygen. That can create some issues underwater diving. Actually, pure oxygen at deeper depths can kind of cause some issues. So it is just compressed air. They just take air that we're breathing right now and just force it all into a cylinder. Now that air is 79% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. There's a little less than 1% of some other gases like neon and whatnot, but we tend to ignore those as scuba divers. But it is just compressed air that we're breathing into tanks. So they're not oxygen tanks, they are air tanks. We're just breathing air, not oxygen. Another one is with pressure. A lot of people believe when you go underwater, the deeper you go, that the water is going to somehow crush you. That does not happen. Your body is made of almost all water. So there is some compression that does take place with your body, but that really only affects air spaces, which would be, in your mouth, in your sinuses, down into your lungs, and your middle ear. Which is why we have to clear our ears when we go diving so you don't rupture an eardrum. But as far as the rest of your body, you could go to an infinite depth. You go to 3,000 meters under the sea, and it's not going to physically just crush your body. It doesn't really work that way. The gear that we're using to breathe on at these depths is delivering air at ambient pressure. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to breathe it, which basically keeps the ocean from crushing your chest. You're able to breathe just like you're on the surface. So you don't really notice any difference when you get at depth down here due to the pressure. Now there are some effects that pressure has that are kind of a big deal, but it's not crushing your body. You will not notice any difference. I could blindfold you, take you 10 feet underwater or 100 feet underwater, and you couldn't tell me the difference. Now some of those differences that are a big deal is with the added pressure, air becomes denser. Again, the air is being delivered at ambient pressure. So what that means is as you go deeper, you're taking more molecules of air with each breath. The air is becoming denser that you're breathing. Now, many of you heard of the bends before, decompression sickness. That is caused by you go underwater, and because of the added water pressure, you're breathing a lot of nitrogen in the air already anyway. When you go under additional pressure, that forces your body to absorb more of those molecules than it normally would, which is fine. But during the dive, we can only absorb so much because we need to be able to get rid of all those molecules before we get back to the surface. That's what the bends is taking on too many of those molecules and staying down either too long or coming up too quickly. And those molecules now, instead of coming out through normal respiration, come out of solution and form bubbles, and that's how you kind of get the bends. That's a pressure-related issue. Also, as scuba divers, we never hold our breath. That's rule number one. What do we got here? We got a conch shell on the ground there. There's another one coming up that's going to be upside down here. But anyway, so again, with the pressure going deeper, it is going to compress air spaces. That's going to affect your buoyancy control device, the BCD, the backpack that you're wearing. You put air in that to help you kind of hover so you're not sinking or floating. As you go deeper, that air gets compressed by the water pressure, so you have to add air to compensate because the air is buoyant by volume. That affects your ears. You start having pressure pushing on your ears, so you have to kind of pinch your nose and blow to equalize your ear pressure. You don't want to hold your breath, because if you held your breath and ascended, because the air is delivered at ambient pressure, it would expand in your chest as you go up, inflating your lungs and eventually overinflating your lungs, and they could rupture in your chest. So there's some bad things that could happen. The pressure also limits your bottom time. Again, you start taking on more nitrogen, so the deeper you go, the less time you're allowed to stay down there. Again, that's because of the nitrogen you're absorbing. There's a rock beauty. Those are pretty cool to see. Don't see those super often. Nice big coral head. Bunch of blue chromis around that one. Now, again, that also affects your air supply. When you go underwater, you have a limited air supply as it is. If that air supply lasts 1 hour on the surface, at 33 feet, it's going to last 30 minutes. At 66 feet, you're down to 20 minutes. At 99 feet, it would last 15 minutes. At 132 feet, it would only last like 12 minutes. And that's assuming everything else is the same. You're breathing at the same rate. You're not breathing it any faster. You're just consuming it faster because of depth. And that's 12 minutes. There's a reef butterfly. Those aren't super common. Those are really cool to see. A couple of them there. It's probably a mating pair. But again, so the deeper you get, the quicker you're using your air supply, whether you want to or not. It just happens because of the added pressure. So not only do you have limited air supply, so if your tank lasts an hour on the surface at a maximum depth of 132, that thing will literally be empty in 12 minutes from start to finish. That's not a lot of time. Your bottom time at that depth is pretty short as well. So being shallow really does dramatically increase your dive time. Pointing off in the distance here, I don't remember what I'm pointing at. I think it's a school of grunts. Not sure. There's a blue tang there, the little parrotfish, kind of hanging out together. Right, going back into the drift here. Bottom's pretty similar to what it was at the beginning. Hasn't changed a whole lot. We'll start getting in some larger coral heads here pretty soon. Getting kind of closer here. It's a small juvenile grouper or some kind of hind, which is kind of a relative, like a cousin to the groupers. They're pretty common down there. You don't see a whole lot of really big fish. See some here and there, but a lot of really small fish down in Cozumel. Again, pointing off in the distance. I'm not quite sure what I'm pointing at off in the distance there. Oh, I do. Yellow grunts. Another school of yellow grunts. So we'll kind of get in close here. Doing videos like this, I got my daughter with me. I don't ever switch the camera. The GoPro's on my mask. It's mounted on my mask, so it just films everything I'm looking at. I don't like to take it off and switch modes and stop video and take a still frame or two and go back to video, because you can't take it off your face and look at it. I don't have the screen on the back. I just do it by the sound of the beeps and everything. So I just run video, and what I like to do is to get still frames. I'll have my daughter do like this and pose. I'm just going to video it here for a minute, and I'll go back later and basically just capture still frames out of the video and just kind of blow those up and have still frame pictures and things like that. So anytime you see her pose, put her in front of something like that, she just kind of hovers there. That's just so we can take some still frames out there. So you got two types of fish here. See the ones with the black tail? Those are blue striped grunts, I believe. The ones with the yellow tail are going to be yellow grunts. It's kind of hard to tell. So many species down here, but I'm pretty sure that's what we're looking at here. And they tend to intermingle pretty regularly. So anyway, back to pressure. When it comes to descending and you start going down, you do have to clear your ears in scuba. You can descend. There is a speed limit. Like, you can't go up too fast. When it comes to going down, making your descent, when you first start going down, the only actual limit you have on the speed to go down is going to be how quickly can you clear your ears. You don't want to be moving too fast and have your ears start having an issue, because then you may rupture your ears before you're able to get them clear. But if you could clear your ears pretty quickly, you can descend pretty quickly. There's really only a speed limit coming up, and again, this keep you from getting the bends. So we kind of come up at a nice slow clip. But going down, normally you can go down pretty fast if you can clear your ears quickly. Alright, so I just noticed on the bottom of pointing, there's the word Cozumel written on the bottom here. I guess the locals have done this. They've taken bricks, kind of just spelt out the word Cozumel across the bottom here. Kind of up to the left, just above that. You can't see it in the screen at the moment. I'll look at it here in just a moment, but there's just a big pile right there. Those are all conch shells, queen conches. These queen conches are pretty common on this dive. We saw quite a few of them. I didn't point every single one of them out, but there's quite a few that we drifted over on this dive here. But that's kind of cool. Be swimming through here and see, They do this all the time, I guess. They already kind of know their path. They have Cozumel written down. There's like a little arrow coming up here in just a second. I'm about to look up at here. It looks like a little house, or I don't know if that's supposed to be like a little house, or if that's supposed to be pointing toward the shoreline, as if to say Cozumel is that way. It's just kind of cool to see that on the bottom. So anyway, you see we're getting into some larger coral heads here. Still got a lot of open bottom, kind of open barren bottom with small stuff. But you're starting to see some kind of larger kind of pillars, like pinnacles almost. And it's not very deep. You think some of the boats going over this really got to be skimming this stuff pretty close. But a bunch of blue tangs. That was a blue tang we just passed back there on that small coral head. Coming up here again, we're kind of getting into some of the larger stuff now. We've drifted quite a ways at this point, like almost 30 minutes into it. There's a couple of schoolmaster snapper that were kind of hovering right there at the top of that reef. And we went through the gaps here. A lot of different corals. I can't even begin to name all the corals on this on the reef here. All of them. They're all here. Can't see the colors too well, but just tons of coral. I can't identify just about any of them, but really beautiful to look at. There's a parrotfish kind of coming down. He's searching the reef for something to chew on. They're just catching up to me here. I'm not sure what that one is there, that long stringy one. I don't think that's not staghorn. Staghorn looks more like a bush without leaves. Again, I can't identify all these corals. There's a schoolmaster snapper. You tell by the bright yellow fins, that typical snapper profile. A couple of them there hanging out with like a blue striped grunt. We do have schoolmaster snapper here in Corpus. They tend to be really small. I've seen them at the jetties. They're like an inch to an inch and a half long. I've never seen one bigger than that here. Alright, so we're kind of coming through this formation here. A couple people cutting around the outside. I'm looking underneath. That's where you're going to see all the cool stuff. If you're going to see like a green moray or a sleeping nurse shark, something like that, it's usually going to be up under one of these ledges. So anytime you're doing drifts like this on a reef, you see some kind of a ledge with an overhang like that, take the time, kind of swim up there. It's good to have a flashlight, even though it doesn't look like we need a flashlight on this dive. When you start looking under ledges like that, it tends to be pretty dark. You can't see under there very well. So bringing a flashlight on a dive like this will help you look under there and find things like nurse sharks that are sleeping, or sea turtles, or things like that. Alright, so see a bunch of grunts here, just on the other side of the local guide here. Again, the local guide's the guy in the orange and yellow right in front of me there. He's just kind of leading us through this drift. The boat's up above us, still kind of drifting above us. I'm trying to tell her to swim over toward the school. I think she already kind of knows what's going on. She already knows. Photo op. Go over here, kind of pose. Do a little hovering, sit down. Looks like she's sitting in a chair here. Just do a little panning shot there and get a little bit of everything in the screen. But tell her good. We're going to move on. Quick adjustment. We're back on our way here. So while you're doing this too, the local guide, he's swimming around. He's looking for fish, and he's looking for nurse sharks and things like that. He wants to find morays and octopus and stuff like that to point it out to you. He wants you to have a good time. These guys work for tips. If they do a good job for you, it's you really should tip them pretty well. If they do a crappy job, it is what it is. But he's just not seeing a whole lot. He's pointed out a few things to us on some of the other dives. But at this point, he's kind of just leading us through everything that's going on here, through these reefs here. I'm not sure. I can't remember what this is. It's a crab or a squat lobster, something kind of sitting in a little hole there. Come at the coral heads like this, start looking down in the holes. You'll start finding little squat lobsters, big full-size lobsters, different kinds of crabs and things of that nature. Eels, a lot of spotted morays and green morays and stuff like that down here. Right, so kind of drifting. Again, we got a little bit more. The coral heads here, the formations are a little bit longer, bigger. It's like a large, a bunch of sandy area, but then you have this huge, like half an acre of just coral Of course, all the fish, all the little fish, bigger fish, all the fish in the area pretty much hanging out right tight to this coral, trying to use it for protection, keep from getting eaten from something bigger. See, the rest of it here is kind of barren, kind of open bottom. And the coral tends to run parallel to shoreline at a specific depth. You go from the beach outward and it's just sand. You run into a coral reef, which is kind of the shallow reef in Cozumel, which tends to be 30 to 40 feet. Then you tend to run into sand again, and there's kind of a gap of just sand. And when you get down to maybe 70, 80 feet, there's a second reef, the deeper reef, where it kind of just drops off into oblivion. I'll post some of the other videos of some of those other dives on those deeper reefs. But so generally speaking, you see the boat up above us is still there. But generally, again, in Cozumel, there's two reefs. There's a shallow reef and a deep reef. When you go diving, you always want to do your deeper dives first. So usually you will go out, do a dive on the deep reef. They will come in somewhere to one of the shallow reefs. Then you'll do a dive on the shallow reef, and they'll come back in. Normally, you're doing just a couple dives a day out of the boat, especially if you're there on a multi-day trip. You can see how shallow it is here. See a bunch of snorkelers on the surface. Kind of get a kick out of that. They're wishing they were down there where we are, looking at this stuff up close. Unfortunately, they got to look at it. I'm sure it's cool from their perspective, but not nearly as cool as it is from our perspective. Right, a lot of really cool coral here. Alright, again, we're just kind of following the local dive guide here, looking around, looking for holes like that where there's like a little cavernous area in the coral head. Things tend to hide in those holes, lobsters, things of that nature. So I'm telling Heather, let's go down just a little bit. We're up off the reef. The more we rise up off the bottom, the more buoyant we're becoming. We're kind of start floating upward a little bit. So we're going back down. I partly too because I want to be close to the reef to be able to see things up close. I don't want to swim too far above it. We don't want to be so close that we're actually kicking it or touching it, though. If you touch the reef at all, you will kill the reef. Whatever you touch, you're going to kill. It's a very fragile, it's a very hard substrate that can cut you like glass. It'll cut you really easy. But that's just kind of the substrate that the coral builds around itself. When the coral polyp itself is out, it's super duper soft and fragile. And again, if you just touch it, you mash that fragile polyp up against that sharp coral that it's built as its home, you'll just kill it immediately. Right, so another small school. Again, I think these are all blue stripe grunts. They have the black in the tail. They didn't have the yellow tail, so I don't think they're yellow grunts. But kind of randoms. Anytime you see a school of fish down here in Cozumel, it's almost always yellow or blue stripe grunts. On the shallow reefs anyway. You will see a little bit larger fish on the deeper reefs, large snapper or large grouper, things of that nature. But these shallow reefs are usually kind of smaller stuff. So again, I'm looking up under the coral heads here. The camera's kind of upside down because I got my head upside down looking up underneath there. Didn't really see anything. So just kind of moving on. It's just kind of cool to see these large coral heads and to look at all these crevices and just wonder what's down there. Who knows what kind of stuff's actually down there that we missed and didn't see, But just coral everywhere. So I'm telling her crab. I was doing a little pincher with my hand to tell her some kind of crab or lobster down here. Again, I can't tell in the video exactly what I'm pointing at, but some kind of crab or lobster hiding up in a little hole under the coral head. Let my daughter kind of get up there, get a close-up on them. Nope. Yep. Again, I don't know what kind of crab that was, but I'm just kind of pointing it out to the other people so they can take a look as they swing by. Alright, kind of moving on. We've got kind of a smaller coral head here. The local guide, he's looking at something. I'm wondering what he's looking at. If he's doing this, he's looking at something cool. They don't do this for no reason. So, but I don't know what it was. Whatever it was, I guess it hid up under the rock on him. So he just kind of bails on it and just kind of moves on. Again, getting pretty rocky here. A lot of large structure. See the instructor here? Now he's pointing something out to us. He's flipping his hands. What he's trying to say is there's a stingray buried itself in the sand. That's why he's flipping his hands like that. He's trying to tell me, hey, there's a stingray buried here. He does a little flip with his hand. Kind of knocks the sand off it. And you kind of see the the ray here. I don't know if this is an electric ray or a stingray. The stingray would have a barb. An electric ray would just be able to give you a little shock. But I'm not going to touch it and find out. But some kind of a ray. He had pretty good eyes. He does this all the time, obviously. He was able to pick that ray up pretty quick, pretty easy. I would have probably missed it. So he's saying shark. He did the fin on the head. He's pointing off in the distance. He's trying to tell us, hey, there's a shark off over there. If I remember correctly, I think it was just a small, like a nurse shark. Not anything we're like worried about coming to attack us or anything like that. But it doesn't show up in the video very well. It's kind of far away. I'm looking for it on the video here. I kind of see it. Again, it doesn't show up on the video super well, but if I remember quickly, it's like a little small 3 or 4 foot nurse shark just kind of swimming right to left on the other side of the reef out there. It's kind of pointing him out to everybody. Right, so now I'm doing the shark sign with my hand, making a fin on my head to let the others know there's a shark out that direction. Again, it's not to warn anybody, it's just so they can take a look at it and get it on video, whatever. Alright, moving into this area over here, you're going to see the stuff back on the bottom again, these little spherals. Again, I don't know what these are. It's just crazy how much of it there is. It covers some pretty large areas, but it's only in specific areas. And again, it's very light. You'll see when I let it go here, so it kind of just floats off into the water. Again, I'm assuming it's some kind of biological. There's queen conch is what I'm pointing at there. I'm talking about him crawling across the bottom. A couple of queen conches. But it's just odd that there's certain areas where these spherals, the darker, you can kind of tell that the darker clay-looking areas here. That's where all those little round little balls are. I don't know what that's from. What is that? Look how much of it there is. If it is like fish excrement, then it's been building up here for quite a long time. Maybe the tide just pushes it into certain areas and it piles up. I don't know. Kind of curious though. So anyway, kind of skipping ahead here. We're crossing kind of some open ground. There's some large coral heads on either side, but I'm not up close to them, so you can't see a good macro of it anyway. So I'm kind of skipping ahead here. We're just kind of catching up to the local guide. He's kind of gotten ahead of us a little ways. So we're doing a little bit of kicking to catch back up with this guy. Again, we are just kind of drifting with the current here. We're not having to kick a whole lot. Just very mild kicking just to kind of move around and point your face in different directions to look at things. But for the most part, the current's just kind of carrying you here. Right. Again, all that stuff on bottom is just absolutely everywhere. So I'm looking for small stuff. I'm looking for things to kind of get up close to with the camera. It's starting to get a little monotonous at this point. It's a lot of the same stuff. Looks like we're getting a little bit more barren bottom here. It won't stay this way, but the bottom here is getting to be kind of bare. Not a lot out there to the right. We're pointing off in the distance here. This happens multiple times in this video. I have no idea what we're pointing at. I really don't know. We clearly saw something out that direction because we're pointing at it, but couldn't tell you what it is. We don't swim over to it. It doesn't swim up to us. So I just kind of bail on it. That's it. I don't know what it is. So we're going to go ahead. I don't like just being over this open, barren, dull bottom, so I kind of directed her. We're going to swim back over here toward the coral head. Of course, that's where all the life is. That's where all the action's happening. All the cool things to look at are always going to be kind of up in the coral here. So you see my pincher move there. So it's probably a lobster under the rock here. Can't tell on the video. You just have to take my word for it. There was a lobster or a crab under that rock there somewhere. Right. If I'd have put my GoPro on a stick, I could have shoved it down there, but that was obviously something kind of smaller down there. But given that my GoPro's on my mask, I can't really shove my head down in there. So, this is as good as it's going to get, I guess. So we're kind of moving around the coral head. We're about to start moving back up current again. This other diver kind of moved in on us. I start going around him, but again, I don't want to get away from the coral head. There's nothing out here to the right to really look at. You see the whole group out here to the right just swimming, follow the leader. We're here to look at stuff, so I don't know why everybody's just following the leader over there and nobody's swimming over the coral looking at the coral. So I decide we're back here near the back anyway. we're going to kind of move back over to the left and get close to the coral head and just check out the coral as we're swimming past it. I don't see the point in just swimming over open bottom, not looking at stuff. So we're swimming back over here. I'm having a little bit of trouble. This other diver, he decided to kind of move over a little bit too, and we were keeping pace with him, so he kind of started kicking me in the face a little bit there. That's my fault. We're just swimming up on him. So we kind of slowed down, let him get ahead of us, so we can get up here close to the coral head. Take a look at some of the stuff going on here. There's some blue chromis. You can always see them a mile away. There's like real iridescent blue, beautiful colors. Most likely a bunch of little damsels on there as well. Some of these coral heads are super duper tall. Just going to kind of swim from coral head to coral head here. Again, depths are still, 30 to 40 foot. We're probably about 35 foot deep here. Can't tell if there's anything inside that coral. I don't see anything. There's almost definitely little wrasse and damsels and things like that around here. But I'm just trying to get a good close-up of some. There's a blue chromis there. Trying to get a good close-up of some of the coral. I'm actually swimming head down and feet up above my head so I can get as close as I can without actually kicking the coral here. Alright, getting down into kind of some smaller, coral's getting a little bit smaller now. Still some good coral heads, but they're not Volkswagen size like some of the ones that we just kind of passed here. So I don't know if those are black chromis I was just seeing or damsels. Some of these smaller fish, we're going by them so quick here, it's hard for me to identify. There's, that might have been a small rock beauty. Not 100% on that one. Looked black and yellow. Might have been a juvenile rock beauty. Alright. So coming up to a pretty good coral head here. We kind of had a little gap there where there wasn't a lot. But we're kind of come up to some stuff here. There's a trunk fish. It's kind of the bigger fish right here. Maybe a honeycomb trunk fish. I'm not sure. You can't see them that well. Blue head wrasse down there at the bottom. Those are super common. We have those around here pretty commonly as well. It's got a blue head, obviously, called a blue head wrasse, so he's got a blue head on him. Up here on this next coral head, there is a gray angelfish. These are not super common. Queen angels are real common. Blue angels are real common. Gray angels, not quite so much. But there's a gray angel, real beautiful fish. Looks just like the other queen angels, but just kind of a gray color with black on the edges of the fins. So again, I'm trying to look under the coral heads, trying to find what I can, any kind of life, lobsters, sharks, morays, anything like that. See the boat up above still. See some snorkelers up there, some divers. That might be divers from our group going back to the boat. I'm not sure. They seem a little further ahead of us, so maybe not, but there's boats everywhere. When you're down in Cozumel, if you look up, there are boats everywhere. So here I'm telling her, hey, when we're at 500 psi, we're going to go up. Because we are so shallow and the boat's basically right above us, we can push our air down pretty low. 500 is pretty low to start an ascent. Normally you'd be on the surface back in the boat and still have 500 left. But given circumstances, we're going to push it down to 500. So again, looking underneath, looking for whatever I can find here. Guide's doing a pretty good job. He's not blasting away, leaving us behind. A lot of times guides will just take off too fast, and people can't really keep up. He's not going too slow either. So we're going at a nice steady pace here. Some pretty good coral coverage here. This whole area's got some pretty good coral on it. Again, we're just kind of following the leader here. I would identify these corals if I could. Unfortunately, I cannot. There's just way too many corals for me to identify. If we had a bunch of these locally, I could probably identify more of them, but we don't have these here off of Corpus Christi, Texas. So again, kind of skipping ahead here in between the coral heads. Some pretty good close-ups. If I'd have taken a light with me underwater, that would have restored the colors. This stuff would look a little prettier. I'm sure some of the stuff is like red and a lot of different colors, but those colors really don't show up because I didn't bring a light source with me. If you bring the light with you and you shine it on them, you get your natural colors back that the water filtered out from the sun. But again, it looks pretty artificial. It's only you're only going to get your natural colors while you're shining the light on it. As soon as you shine the light off the object, it goes right back to what it looks like now, just kind of dull greenish colors. So still beautiful, still coral everywhere, just a ridiculous amount of coral everywhere. So kind of a selfie, little panning shot here. Me and Heather are just kind of holding her so she stays in frame while we kind of do a little 360 rotation here in place. Just kind of show the background. Pretty good pile of coral here. Again, there's the instructor. I'm not sure what this one is. Looks kind of like a cactus. Pretty cool looking. Pretty large formation of it here. I'm not sure what kind of coral that is. I'm sure it would be pretty easy to look up. Of course, I haven't done that, so I just know that it's a type of coral. But still beautiful. Still very beautiful to look at. All this stuff is just like amazing to see up close and look at. You just see all the life down inside of all this stuff as well. Again, you can see the surface right there. We're not very deep. We're maybe 30 foot deep here. We're getting in the second half of the dive. Again, I'm going to do some selfie stuff with Heather here with my daughter. I kind of took the GoPro was mounted on my mask. I took it off my mask. I'm just kind of holding it out in front of me, pointing it back at me and her, so I can have some actual footage of her and I actually swimming in Cozumel. Most of the time, the camera's on my face. I'm never in my own videos, so it was just something that kind of occurred to me in the middle of this long dive to, hey, why don't I just take it off and kind of film myself? I don't normally put this on a stick. I've seen plenty of divers take GoPros on stick, and I've seen a bunch of those divers drop those GoPros and sticks and sink into the depths, never to be seen again. The ocean bottom's littered with GoPros on sticks, I promise. I like it on the mask. I just record the whole dive, and it just does its thing without me having to worry about it. So you see this little blob right in front of me here. I think this is some type of siphonophore. You can see me pointing at it here. It looks kind of fuzzy. It'll come in focus a little bit here. You see it kind of wiggling around. They're segmented creatures. You see there's all kinds of these. You see them at night. You see them at certain depth, usually about 15-20 feet below the surface. There'll be like a layer of them. A lot of times they're jellyfish. But again, I think this is some type of siphonophore. It's a segmented creature. They get longer. But you see these things just randomly, little fuzzy little things just floating around in the water. But it's just so much life down there. It's unreal. I couldn't tell you what kind it is, but again, I think it's just some type of siphonophore. So again, here's a pretty good angle. Kind of like this makes for a pretty good screen capture here. Good background shot. Coral head in the background. You can see the surface. I need to hire me a camera guy to swim with me and just film me all the time, I guess. So again, just getting some selfies kind of in here. There's a tang, some kind of surgeon fish. Well, that's a black tang. He's pretty dark. Normally tangs are blue. He looks a little dark, almost black. But some kind of surgeon fish. Surgeon fish have a spine on their caudal peduncle, like right in front of the tail. The narrowest part of the fish, right before you get to the tail, is the caudal peduncle. And those surgeon fish, the reason they're called a surgeon fish is on either side of that, a little spine that comes out and points forward. So fish swallow other fish head first. If you start swallowing that fish head first, what it does is that spine sticks forward, and as it's going down another fish's throat, it's thrashing its tail side to side, and those spines are just stabbing that fish in the throat. And the idea is hopefully that bigger fish will spit that smaller fish out when he starts getting poked in the throat. If you try to hold that fish in your hand, you're going to catch all those spines in your hand when he starts flipping his tail at 100 miles an hour. So you probably don't want to try to handle those guys. So here's a small damselfish. As they get bigger, this is kind of a larger damsel. They get kind of mottled in color, kind of dullish brown. There's different colors to them, but they're not as vibrant as when they're smaller. like smaller dusky damsels and cocoa damsels. They're real brilliantly colored, real bright blue and yellow and orange and stuff. And as those damsels get bigger, like tricolor damsels, stuff like that, as they get bigger, they tend to just get kind of dull colored. There's some parrotfish off in the distance there on that coral head. Parrotfish are super duper common down there. They're really pretty. A lot of different colors in the scale pattern on them. You can get pretty close to them too. They're not super skittish, so you can get pretty close to the parrotfish down there. Again, we're just kind of swim along, doing a little bit of selfie work here. Not a lot to talk about here. Again, I'm just kind of holding on to her first stage, trying to get a good shot. The current's kind of fighting. We're both kind of fighting the current here while we're trying to do this. So every once in a while, I'm just kind of holding on to her to try to make sure we're both in the shot there, so I can get a good still frame out of it. But again, we're getting near the end of the dive here. We're 45 plus minutes into this dive. We're well into this dive already. We're into the second half of it, probably the last quarter of this dive here. The video's only got a few more minutes left. Again, we're fast forwarding through some of this, so the dive's actually longer than this, but pretty good long dive. Again, you see the boat there in the distance up above my daughter. Again, it's just kind of drifting along with us and waiting for us to put a marker buoy up. Big coral head. Tricolor damsel there, the white, yellow, and black. You're going to see some more here in a second. Those white, black, and yellow ones, those are all tricolor damsels. Those are super common. Again, when they get big, they get kind of a duller color. Some really nice barrel sponges there. Real cool green color to them. A lot of coral coverage here, like a whole wall of it. Again, the local guide's pointing something off in the distance. Can't really tell what it is. This was way too long ago for me to remember. So again, it's just there's something in the distance the guide was pointing at. I couldn't tell you what it is. More than likely a bigger fish, or we wouldn't be pointing at it in the distance because we wouldn't see it. So again, just swimming along here, getting our selfies along as we're kind of swimming across the reef. You see blue tangs and stuff like that off in the background. They're actually pretty common down there in Cozumel. You see these yellow fish on here, yellow with a black stripe. I think those are female bluehead wrasse. The bluehead wrasse, you'll see one, and you'll see a bunch of yellow fish with them. What happens is that's basically the one with the blue head's a male. The yellow ones are the females. What happens is if you were to kill the blue head, the male, he's got like a whole harem of females. If you were to kill or remove in some way the blue head, what would happen is the largest female in the rest of the group would convert and become a male. So here's a couple of large schoolmaster snapper under this ledge here. A really large blue striped grunt down there with them. It's a couple of pretty good sized snapper. But yeah, with those wrasse, it's pretty cool. They'll actually, they're all born female. They're all female. When there's a large group, the largest female converts over. It happens pretty quickly. It turns into a male and then maintains that harem. When something happens to that male, basically the next larger female takes over and becomes a male. Kind of weird. That's nature. It's part of the reason I dive. You don't get to see stuff like that happen on land very often. So anyway, getting into the last video here, last kind of minute or so. Again, we're just kind of swimming over the coral. You're about to see the guide here in a minute. He's going to take his surface marker buoy on a reel, and he's going to send that line to the surface here. You see the line he's holding. Okay, the reason he sent that up, it's like a little tube you fill with air. He sent that to the surface to let the boat know, hey, we're done diving. We're about to come up. So the boat will drive up within vicinity of that marker buoy. The divers will use that line to go up, do their safety stop at 15 to 20 feet for 3 to 5 minutes. That's just to help off-gas additional nitrogen before you go all the way up to the surface, just as an added safety precaution. And then you use that, go the rest of the way up, you surface right at the buoy, and then the boat's usually 20 feet away. You just kind of swim over the boat, take your fins off, and jump back on board the vessel and start taking your gear off, and the dive's over. Right, so kind of last look at the reef here. Again, kind of closing out the video. Guide's got the line up. We're all about to head up. A bunch of blue chromis down here. See all those blue fish are all blue chromis. But good note to finish on here. Again, this was the Columbia Reef Shallow in Cozumel. It's been a pretty long drift dive. The actual drift dive is probably going to be an hour and 15 minutes. Pretty long dive. But I recommend it if you go down there. I highly recommend Columbia Shallow. Appreciate you guys watching the video. And hopefully I'll see you guys on the next one.